Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and the release of the Shining sequel, Dr. Sleep, earlier this month got me thinking about sequels. See, we all know the standard best sequels list. Aliens, The Godfather Part 2, Evil Dead 2, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, The Empire Strikes Back, you know the list. But what about more recent sequels? Because we've had some really excellent ones recently, and since we're about only 6 weeks away from the new decade, I think it's about time we start finalizing those best of the decade lists, and I'm going to start with my top 10 favorite sequels of 2010s. Kicking off this list at number 10 is The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. I bet you guys did not see this one coming because the peak of my love for The Hunger Games happened before I started this channel. But it's a thing, I am a Hunger Games fan, and this is a very nostalgic sequel for me. Catching Fire is not only my favorite book of the trilogy, but also my favorite film of the franchise. While the original Hunger Games presents us with a bleak and brutal dystopian future where the government controls people through fear and terror and teens are being forced to fight to the death in a reality TV show, Catching Fire takes that concept and develops it in every way. Things get even darker, the emotional impact is stronger, the contestants are deadlier, the arena is more dangerous, and the government is revealed to be even more evil. Not to mention the huge improvement from the visual standpoint and some excellent additions to the cast and characters. I rewatched this one recently and it 100% holds up. Next up, at number 9 is 10 Cloverfield Lane, the unexpected sequel to the found footage horror film Cloverfield. This one came out in 2016 and is one of those sequels that is completely different from the previous film, and once again, one of those films that improves on the original in every way. 10 Cloverfield Lane might as well be a standalone film, and you could easily watch it without watching the original Cloverfield because it shows a completely different perspective rather than continuing where the first movie left off. This claustrophobic thriller not only has its viewers at the edge of their seats with its constantly building tension, but also features brilliant performances and characters you can actually root for. John Goodman alone is worth watching this film for, especially since he's going to make you change your mind about his character again and again. At number 8, I have Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, the epic finale to this insanely popular franchise. Endings are always difficult, and wrapping up something as huge as Harry Potter comes with sky-high expectations, not only from the 7 previous films, but also from the book series fandom. That is a lot of pressure and a lot to deliver on. But they did it. This is one of those rare occasions where splitting the final film of the franchise into 2 parts feels justified, and the conclusion of the story about the boy who lived was exactly what it needed to be. The journey this franchise takes from the whimsical feel of Hogwarts in the early films to the apocalyptic fight between good and evil in the last film is unlike anything else, and though Deathly Hallows Part 1 may not have been all that satisfying on its own, the payoff of Part 2 is absolutely worth it. Then, at number 7, we have finally arrived at a superhero film. One of my favorites from 2014 is X-Men: Days of Future Past. I really enjoyed X-Men First Class. I love the new cast, which is why it's pretty unfortunate what this turned into with Apocalypse, but X-Men: Days of Future Past is definitely my favorite X-Men film. First of all, I love a good time travel movie, and it's so great to to see one that actually works and makes sense. This also means that it has double the X-Men cast, which is an obvious treat, and seeing all of these characters use their powers is a lot of fun. I'm sure you all remember that Quicksilver scene, which is one of the best showcases of superpowers ever put on film. Days of Future Past is serious when it needs to be, but does not feel weighed down by the drama and uses its humor very well. Basically, it's what a superhero blockbuster should be. Coming in at number 6 is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. This one is very special to me personally. It was the first Star Wars film I saw on the big screen, and I loved it. They brought in characters we already loved, they brought in exciting new characters, and they definitely reignited the excitement for the franchise overall. Say what you will about J.J. Abrams, but he deserves a lot of credit for this because he managed to combine nostalgia with a new story, setting up conflicts with a lot of potential, and transitioned towards a new cast that most people were on board with after this film. Plus, it's a gorgeous sci-fi film to watch. I don't think much needs to be said here because the discussion around the new Star Wars films has been very passionate ever since this one came out. But if you want to know my more detailed thoughts, I have a full review on my channel, which I will leave in the info box below, along with all of the other reviews I have for the films on this list. At number 5, I have another superhero film and one of my favorite MCU films, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This one really took me by surprise because I did not think the first Captain America film was all that interesting. It was good, but I kind of walked away from it thinking that Captain America is the most boring Avenger. The Winter Soldier turned all of that around. This was the first Russo brothers MCU film, and they really stepped up the game for the franchise here. Winter Soldier maintains the balance between being a spy thriller and fun superhero action, while also taking care to develop its characters, which is what made Steve Rogers go from my least favorite Avenger to one of my favorites. I know the Avengers event movies are a big hit with most people, but the character-focused stories that deal with personal inner conflict have always been what I found more interesting, so it's really no surprise that this one is a big favorite for me. Next up, at number 4, is a film from a franchise that just won't quit and somehow keeps getting better and better. I am, of course, talking about the Mission Impossible franchise, and my pick is Rogue Nation. I was having a hard time picking a favorite here because I loved every single Mission Impossible film we got this decade, and I just can't think of another franchise where I am that excited for films 7 and 8. I don't know how they do it, but every time one of these comes out, I think there is no way they will be able to impress me again, and yet they do. This spot almost went to Mission Impossible Fallout, but the opera scene in Rogue Nation will win me over every time. Plus, this film gave us the gift that is Rebecca Ferguson in all of her spy action glory, and that alone is enough of a reason to watch this film. And of course, it comes with all of the suspense, gadgets, action, and thrills we already love this franchise for. All right, here we go. We are now in the top 3. I think those of you who have been following my channel for a while probably know exactly what these films are, but may not be so sure about the order. And if you don't know what these films are, then you're probably not subscribed to my channel, in which case I really think you should subscribe. But let's do this. At number 3, I have Skyfall. I have spoken about my love for Daniel Craig's version of James Bond on multiple occasions, and I'm always debating which I like more, Casino Royale or Skyfall. However, since Casino Royale came out in 2006, I don't have to make that choice today, and Skyfall absolutely deserves a spot in the top 3 best sequels of this decade. After being thoroughly disappointed by Quantum of Solace, my expectations here were pretty mild, and yet this ended up being one of those films I wanted to rewatch as soon as it ended. Beyond Daniel Craig's brooding portrayal of Bond that I enjoy so much, this is a great and surprisingly self-aware story that questions the relevance of Bond in today's world and also delivers one of the best cinematic villains in the face of Javier Bardem as Silva. In the end, Skyfall is not only a great Bond movie, it's actually just a great film and one of my all-time favorites. Next up, for number 2, I am going with Mad Max Fury Road. Talk about an amazing and stunning action blockbuster. I love everything about this film, and I am not afraid to say that this is not only one of the best sequels of this decade, but just generally is one of the best films of this decade. It is iconic, it is unforgettable, and it is so much fun. Just like with Skyfall, this was a film I immediately wanted to rewatch and actually ended up watching it in theaters twice during the opening weekend. When people tell me I somehow hate blockbusters, I remind them that Fury Road was my favorite film of 2015. A film that works as a sequel and as a standalone story. A film that takes Teal and Orange to new heights, keeps you glued to your seat with relentless action, and manages to develop its characters with pretty minimal dialogue. Look, it's not my fault George Miller raised the bar so high for action blockbusters, but this is another one of my all-time favorites I'm ready to watch over and over again. Finally, at number 1, I think you've guessed it, say it with me, Blade Runner 2049. You guys know how big of a Denis Villeneuve fan I am, and I was so excited to see this one. But what's funny is that I was actually also pretty nervous about it. The original Blade Runner is an iconic sci-fi classic. It is one of my favorite films of all time, and it is a favorite for so many people. So the expectations for this sequel were insanely high, and I just cannot imagine the guts you need to have to take on a sequel for something like Blade Runner. But Denis Villeneuve did it, and he managed to make it an out-of-this-world experience. Honestly, I should have known better than to doubt the director's skill here, because I have never been disappointed by his work, and I am convinced that there is nothing he can't do. Blade Runner 2049 went past blending nostalgia with a new story. It somehow felt faithful to the original ideas, and yet completely new. It takes some of the concepts from Blade Runner, but actually has its own angle and something new to add. It's one of the most gorgeous films I have ever seen in my entire life, and it's one of those films you can talk about for hours. I am completely in love with it, and there is no doubt in my mind that this is the best sequel of the decade, one of the best films of the decade, and one of the best sequels ever made. And that's it for this video. I actually had a pretty hard time making this list, especially past the top 3, because those 3, honestly, I knew right away. I flipped them a few times, but they were pretty solid. However, everything below that, especially below number 6, got rearranged so many times. And there were films that I was so sure were going to be on this list and definitely deserve to be mentioned that I ended up leaving off just based on personal preference. If I were to do some kind of honorable mentions thing, I would definitely include John Wick Chapter 2 and Logan. Those were definitely the 2 that I thought were going to make this list, but somehow at the end did not make the cut. Both easily one of the best sequels of the decade as well, but you know, I have to go with my personal preference and the films that I connect with the most. I would love to know, what are your favorite sequels of the decade? I know there are a lot to pick from, but try to tell me your top 5 in the comments. I would love to know if we have some of the same ones, if there are some different ones that I completely ignored, or maybe I just haven't seen them for some reason. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. A special thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for sticking with me and supporting me for however long you've supported me, whether you're new or whether you've been there for quite some time. I really, really appreciate you guys. If you did enjoy this video, which I hope you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.